Welcome back. In this video, we are going to be taking a quick look at the 3D cursor and 3D transformations orientations in the 3D editor in Blender 4.0. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy software educational content. Let's get started. The 3D cursor is a point in space that has both a location and a rotation. We've seen in other videos where it can be moved around. In the view alignment video, we saw that it can be placed elsewhere in the scene and the view aligned to it. This is because it has a location and rotation, hence why it is called a 3D cursor. The 3D cursor is used for a number of purposes. For example, it defines where newly added objects are placed and can also be used to manually position and orient the transform gizmo. Let's move the cursor over here. Also, don't forget to select the cursor tool if you do not already have it selected and add an object. Now let's add a cube, and if you recall, you can do so with Shift+A on your keyboard. If you do not know how to find a cube immediately, you can just start typing and add it into the scene. There are actually a few methods to positioning the 3D cursor. The easiest way would be direct placement with the mouse. In the Object, Edit, and Pose modes, you can quickly and easily move the 3D cursor with Shift+, the right mouse button, and clicking where you would like to place the cursor. Assuming that you haven't got the tool selected already, the cursor tool offers the most flexibility. Simply select it in the toolbar and click a point in the scene with the left mouse button to place the 3D cursor there. In the tool settings, you can choose how it should be oriented. By default, it matches the view orientation, but you can also make it match the surface normal of a piece of geometry or the transform orientation. To do that, just go over to the tab on the properties over here and click this. Alternatively, you can press Shift+ the right mouse button with any tool selected. In this case, the 3D cursor will always be aligned to the view orientation. If you want some hyper-accurate positioning and feel like being meticulous, you can adjust the location and rotation in the sidebar. Just select the Tool tab if you haven't already. One more way of positioning the 3D cursor is through the Snap menu, which allows you to move the cursor to the origin of the selected object, for example. You can do this with Shift+S. Now that we have the cursor out of the way, we are looking at transform orientations. This is something we can deal with in the Object and Edit modes. You could start by going to the header and transform orientation, or use the shortcut, which is the comma key. Just hold it down. The transform orientation determines the orientation of the object gizmo. The object gizmo is this thing here. Changing this orientation can make it easier to perform transformations in the direction you want. The orientation can also be changed temporarily, while performing a hotkey-based transformation with axis locking. For example, if you first press G to start moving an object, then X to lock to the orientation's X-axis, and finally X a second time, you'll get a lock to an alternative orientation. The local orientation if it was global previously, and the global orientation otherwise. We can see the different orientations we can choose here. Let's go one by one and make sure we are in edit mode. Look here in the header, and if this says object or anything other than edit, press the tab key or select edit. The global orientation. If we select this option, we align the transformation axes to world space. The world axes are shown by the navigation gizmo in the top right corner of the viewport, as well as the grid floor. You're probably very familiar with this by now, as this is how we have been aligning everything. The local orientation. This aligns the transformation axis to the active object's orientation. If we have the cube selected and press the R key, we can rotate our cube. What you will find after changing to local orientation is that now the X, Y, and Z directions are relative to the cube. Try it out. First pressing G to grab our cube and then pressing X or Y no longer is the same as the global X or Y. The normal orientation. In edit mode, this orients the transformation axis so that the Z-axis of the gizmo matches the average normal of the selected elements. We will talk about normals at a later time. This is vector math stuff. In object mode, this is equivalent to local orientation. The gimbal orientation. This orients the transformation axis to visualize the workings of the object's rotation mode. This is specifically useful for the Euler modes, where the object is rotated one axis at a time. The rotation axes don't stay perpendicular to each other and might even overlap, a phenomenon known as gimbal lock that complicates animation. To those wondering what a gimbal is, I had to look it up too. A gimbal is a pivoted support that permits the rotation of an object about an axis. It is used to help stabilize a real-world camera. Gimbal lock is the loss of 1 degree of freedom in a three-dimensional, three-gimbal mechanism that occurs when the axes of 2 of the 3 gimbals are driven into a locking position, effectively restricting the motion to a 2-dimensional space. Take a look at the animation on screen. The view orientation aligns the transformation axes to the view, meaning they change as you orbit around. The x-axis means left or right. The y-axis means up or down. And the z-axis means towards or away from the screen. The cursor orientation, which aligns the transformation axis to the 3D cursor. And the parent orientation. This aligns the transformation axis to the parent object. We haven't talked about parent-child object relationships yet, but this would be what this is referring to. You can also define custom orientations as well. However, I will leave that up to you to do as homework. Please, take a look at the manual provided in the description for more on that. That's all for this video for the 3D cursor and transform orientations in the 3D editor. Thanks for making it all the way through the video. Join us in the next video as well. If you like content like this, please be sure to support the channel by liking and subscribing. See you in the next video.